The ability to have a clean, safe form of energy like electricity is really essential for society's needs. From health, for example, simply having refrigeration has prevented a lot of disease and prevents a lot of food loss and waste and improves the health of people. And then there's comfort, lighting, electricity, air conditioning, all of these things, as well as the ability to manufacture essential things.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me on the Gift of Need podcast. I'm Jude DiMeglio Trang, author and observer of human need in society. This podcast seeks to address the overlooked power of need and how it shapes behavior, relationships, and society, and is born from the belief that our needs are not burdens but gifts. I'm excited because my guests today are two of my favorite scientists. My husband, Dr. John Trang, and our friend, Dr. Roger Stoller. We are actually visiting Roger and Robin here in beautiful Knoxville, Tennessee. John is a pharmaceutical scientist, and Roger is a material scientist and nuclear engineer.
Hello.
Hi, Jude.
John and I met Roger and his wife Robin when we were all newly married, and we were visiting mutual friends up in Santa Barbara where Roger was at university and Robin was working. He attempted to teach us how to surf. The old movies of me standing facing straight forward and being shoved into the waves just seconds before falling off is embarrassing but priceless.
She looked good.
Well, virtually anything I could add would just be like crazy, but it was a lot of fun.
Oh boy, I still can't surf. Well, today we're going to talk about why the world needs scientists, specifically about the scientific process, nuclear energy and pharmaceuticals, that's drugs, and the needs and gifts associated with those fields. Roger is a materials scientist. During his career, he worked for one of the U.S. Department of Energy's national laboratories. Although I'm interested in the natural scientists, I do not think like a scientist at all. As someone who failed chemistry class in high school, I am way out of my depth in a conversation about nuclear energy. But Roger will explain what all this means to us. Won't you?
The use of nuclear energy has created a lot of interesting research areas, including how the radiation affects the materials and their performance and behavior. And so my primary research area involved determining and helping to devise strategies to mitigate the effects of radiation on structural materials that are used either in current nuclear energy systems or anticipated future advanced nuclear energy systems.
Can you give us a layperson's example? And was your work primarily computer modeling, theoretical, or were you involved with application in some way?
I was involved in both. Roughly half of my career was computational modeling and simulation. The other half was involved in experimental programs, sometimes managing experimental programs. A simple example is that irradiating a metal, a ferritic steel or a stainless steel, creates a lot of small defects which make the material harder, which sounds like a good thing, but when something gets harder, it also becomes brittle. And so we looked at things like reactor pressure vessels, which can suffer embrittlement, as well as I mentioned, advanced systems like fusion reactor materials, where the problems are a little bit different, but again, related to defects that are created by the radiation.
Well, were you a particularly curious kid and interested in science?
It's been a long time since I was a kid, so I don't remember being particularly curious about anything. But I was always sort of interested in how things worked and enjoyed taking things apart to try to figure out why and how they worked. with the problem, of course, being how to reassemble them and to restore function. And I guess as I grew older, I recognized that I had an affinity for mathematics and the sciences.
Yeah, that's something I missed in the genetics of my family. Since curiosity is the motivation behind asking questions and seeking their answers, regardless really of what field you're in, but it is fundamental to scientific discovery, there must have been some curiosity, and you're trying to understand how things work. And then you had to solve the problems to get them back together, which you said you did. I think of this quote by Flannery O'Connor: "The scientist has the habit of science, the artist the habit of art." And I think what she's saying is, regardless of our field or area of influence, it's the daily habitual disciplines that bring the development into our lives that makes us skillful and capable, whether you're an artist or a scientist. And it's also a way in which we see the world, because I know we see the world differently according to our gifts and abilities. John, would you explain the scientific process to us? I'm thinking it's fairly similar for any area of science.
I would agree with that, and this is pretty much the textbook definition. It's essentially a method that's a systematic process that we use to acquire knowledge, and we do that through observation, experimentation, and analysis. It involves forming a hypothesis, conducting experiments to test the hypothesis, refining the hypothesis based on the results, and then eventually, hopefully, you get to finalize your conclusions. And of course, for me, the process does involve something called iteration. And I love that. But, you know, Jude knows so much about the iterative part, especially drives her crazy when I apply it to relatively unimportant daily decisions.
Oh boy, is that for sure. It was a word I didn't even know growing up, and now it's in my daily vocabulary. Roger, what caused you to pursue an education in nuclear engineering and material science?
Well, pursue is probably too strong a word. After wayward high school years and going into the Marine Corps thereafter, I got out of the Marine Corps and worked just different odd jobs, drove a truck, was a bartender for a while, sold furniture for a couple of years, and I decided to look into going to college. And at that time, I remembered a friend from high school who had gone into chemical engineering when we graduated, and I thought, well, that sounds interesting or suitable. So I got a catalog from the University of California and was looking through there for places that taught chemical engineering. And I saw one at the University of California, Santa Barbara, that had a Department of Chemical and Nuclear Engineering, which is the first time I'd ever heard of that. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. Maybe I'll try that. And so that's what I did. And in the process of doing my bachelor's degree, I worked on a special project my senior year with a member of the faculty that involved some simple computational simulation of the effects of radiation on stainless steel. And the work was challenging and interesting and enjoyable, and it set the stage for what would be my graduate school, pursuing my PhD and my career in research.
Well, in a general sense, pursuing a field of study meets the needs for gainful employment. All the opportunities I think about that we have in Western society to choose any area of our heart's desire, you know, is really a gift, and especially compared to the majority of the people around the globe whose only options are more related to survival and doing what their family has done for decades or generations. Well, wonder at the world around us must be at the core of every area of science. If you're a botanist, you will be drawn to the plant world and its beauty and diversity. If you're a zoologist, you might be drawn to tiny microbes only visible under a microscope, or maybe the life cycle of elephants. So John, as a pharmaceutical scientist, would your wondering land in more abstract areas and use math skills to develop and refine and solve theories or models?
Well, absolutely, and perhaps it would be helpful, since I was one of the first folks out in this specific discipline within pharmaceutical sciences. Most people have heard of pharmacology, which is essentially the effect of the drug on the body. What I do is study pharmacokinetics, which has to do with what the body does to the drug. So it's kind of like the flip side of the coin. And I use a relatively straightforward calculus and basic physiology to model the absorption, distribution, metabolism, and elimination of drugs and drug products. And then my work in the successful candidates becomes part of the package insert that says how much to take and how often to take it.
Well, do you ever have a chance to see the work you've done eventually come to market as a drug? I know this is a question I've asked you sometimes when a project comes in, or I see you working on a chart that has, 59 alphabets wide and 3,000 rows long, and I'm wondering how the heck you can stand to do that. Do you ever see a tangible result?
Yes, of course, my hope and prayer is that the work that I do, most of which is in the early drug development stage, either called preclinical or non-clinical. However, I've worked on a number of phase 1, 2, and 3 studies as well. But often I'm only familiar with the name as ABC123, in that it hasn't even been given a generic drug name yet, let alone a trade name. However, it has been very rewarding to learn of an FDA approval or a European medical agency's approval or even a Japanese regulatory body approval of a drug I've worked on.
So, Roger, why has there been so much conflict and disagreement around nuclear energy? Is it all about nuclear waste?
Well, that's more than I think I can answer here in a short podcast, because many articles and books have been written, and me and many other people have had hours-long conversations with others about this. And, fear is certainly a factor for some people. Fear of accidents associated with operating nuclear power plants as well as waste storage facilities. And to a great extent, the unfounded association of nuclear weapons with nuclear energy, nuclear-generated electricity, also contributes to this fear. And people generally have a hard time assessing and comparing the relative risks of different kinds of technology. People are more afraid of flying than driving their car, even though we kill way more people in cars. People are more afraid of nuclear energy than coal, even though we kill we over the years have killed thousands and thousands of people with coal.
Right.
So both the fear factor and the lack of knowledge make it difficult to determine how safe or how dangerous it is to generate electricity by any one technology. But in addition, for many years, there's been sort of a cadre of people who are opposed to nuclear energy for philosophical reasons, who exploit the natural fear that uninformed people have.
Yeah. Well, one thing is certain, human need has always been a major factor driving scientific interest and research. Roger and John, what needs in society do you see your work benefiting? Roger, why don't you go first?
Well, the ability to have a clean, safe form of energy like electricity is really essential for society's needs. From health, for example, simply having refrigeration has prevented a lot of disease and prevents a lot of food loss and waste and improves the health of people. And then there's comfort, lighting, electricity, air conditioning, all of these things, as well as the ability to manufacture essential things such as pharmaceuticals, computers, cars, and so on.
All that energy that we consume, yeah.
Well, it's my hope, of course, that many of the drugs I've worked on over the years have actually reached the market and that they're actually serving needs in society. And I'm thrilled to see the commercials on the evening news about this monoclonal antibody and that monoclonal antibody. That's one of the areas that I was at the very early level of working on with a great group of people in University of Alabama, Birmingham, and the Comprehensive Cancer Centers. So when you see that commercial and you see MAB at the end of the word, that's possibly something that I've worked on.
Right, and so that's definitely serving society in the treatment of disease. Roger, serving humanity with your natural abilities has been fulfilling, but there's always been something else outside of work that you have spent a lot of time on. You and Robin have been serving at a little church called Christ Chapel near the university campus in Knoxville for decades. Have you had difficulty reconciling your faith as a Christian with being a nuclear scientist? Did you have to leave your brain at the door to practice your faith, as so many people think?
No, my faith was really never a discernible problem during my career. I mean, I had colleagues who were also believing Christians, and many more who were not. Among those that were not, some were accepting and some couldn't understand it, of course. But for the most part, I wouldn't say that unbelieving scientists are any more skeptical than unbelieving plumbers. They simply phrase their objections differently.
John, how about for you?
Well, nothing that I have learned or experienced in my scientific career has created any conflicts with my faith. The fact that we have the intrinsic ability and the intellectual capacity to search out, to question, to discover, to characterize this physical world around us, whether it's the smallest subatomic particle that Roger works on, or a 400 molecular weight molecule that I work on, or the stars in the universe. The fact that we can do that, to me, is the strongest, most obvious evidence that supports my faith and my belief in a created universe. And if God wanted to use 4+ billion years to accomplish his incredible work and describe it to us poetically and allegorically and beautifully in his love story to us, I do not have any problems with that.
Yeah, that's interesting. John and I have talked a lot about the Genesis story over the years, and I don't have any problem believing that it was created in 6 days and God resting on the seventh, but I also don't have any problem with it if each of those days, was 1,000 years or 1 billion years. It doesn't really matter. To me, there cannot be, I cannot look at nature and at humans and think that there was not intelligence behind creating it. How has your Christian faith directed how you approach your work? Roger, why don't you start with that?
Well, I'd say the primary way my faith has informed my work is to do it in, I would say, a biblical way, to do it with integrity, to develop and maintain good working relationships with my colleagues, and to be an honorable and faithful person the best I can.
John?
I've been very similar, whether I'm teaching or consulting. I've tried to remember that everything I do, I'm doing as unto the Lord. That I'm not working for the university or the client or the paycheck. And as Raj mentions, I think a very valuable part of our walk has to do with establishing and maintaining right relationships. And this applies in the work setting as well.
So let's ask this. How have you guys used your discretionary time? John, maybe you want to answer that.
Well, aside from having the privilege to travel really the world with my lovely wife and the opportunity to spend a good amount of time on motorcycles, I actually love playing music with others, which has been a huge part of both of our lives, Jude and I, since back in the day. And we've had the opportunity to do this in Christian bands and with worship teams. Actually, with our daughter in Australia, it's around the world we've done these kind of things.
And I guess for me, the discretionary time is contribution would be what is sort of functionally a lay pastor at Christ Chapel, the church that you mentioned earlier, where we've been involved there in teaching and counseling and that sort of thing for a long time.
And I would say, because I know you two so well, that the need that you have to help others is also a need for meaning. There's a really great quote from Einstein that I love from his work, The World as I See It. The most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion that stands at the cradle of true art and true science. And I love that. There's so much about Einstein and his life that I see as so important and so, I don't know, just a really special guy. I have a memory. My mom and dad were raised in Princeton, and when my dad was in high school, he had a job for a dry cleaning company. He was a delivery driver, and he told us about the times that he would go to deliver dry cleaning to Einstein's house, and he'd go there and see him, and he was definitely, as people describe him, definitely the absent-minded professor, and but that was one of his experiences. And my mom said she remembers seeing him crossing Nassau Avenue, and he would almost get hit by cars because he would just step right out. He had these high-top sneakers where they were unlaced, and the wild hair, the whole bit. That's actually was Einstein. But I like that, his speaking about the mysterious, because I think that's part of science, is knowing that there's more that we don't know, right? We go, we look for it, you guys search for it in the way that the area of science that you are experts in. And I think that's what people do in all their fields. The real creators like push the boundaries, whether it's music or art or design or cooking. It's mysterious in the sense of the unknown, right? Any thoughts on that, Raj?
Well, I think things that we don't understand are always mysterious. There's a saying that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And when I watch people use computers, I understand where that expression came from.
For me, I just think of an analogy I was told as a young kid, that if we pictured a very fine, small point, let's say even in the center of the world, and realized that the knowledge that we quote unquote think we have is equivalent to that tiny point in the center, a full stop period in the center of the earth compared to the entire size of the world. And it's probably astronomically larger than that in terms of, we've learned a lot and it's all been good, and that's a wonderful thing. But again, the fact that we're able to even pursue these things and intellectually discuss and debate, to me, just makes it very, very obvious that every day His mercies are new.
The reason that I chose, when I was working with the artist for the logo for the Gift of Need, that circle kind of was, I had this vision of kind of a black hole in space, and a void that's there that kind of relates to like all the stuff that we don't know. Of course, it was kind of the wrong analogy because the black holes kind of suck things in, I guess. I don't really understand them, but I like them, the idea visually, and all the things that just, to me, are out there in the universe, like swirling around. There's just stuff we don't know, and to me, it's very beautiful.
Interesting that you should say that. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Raj, but I remember you're explaining your work to me years ago, is that you were modeling the voids in your solid materials.
Yeah, that is one of the defects that can form in certain materials when they're irradiated, is you create little voids, little hollow spaces that actually makes the material then swell.
And that's bad?
That's generally bad.
And you can tell I don't know enough about science to know whether that was good or bad. Well,
whereas sometimes voids are an opportunity to fill something with a gift.
all right. Well, Roger and John, I think you have both said, in essence, see if I get this summary right, is that work that creates a positive impact or has value fulfills our need for purpose and meaning. And psychologists do tell us that meaningful work is significant to our overall well-being and, of course, to job satisfaction. It also helps prevent burnout. After long careers, I would say you are both great examples of the link between meaningful work and better health and contentment. I know you both pretty well. Roger, we have to ask about what you're doing now that you're retired. I'm so glad, I almost forgot. Since you're retired, you've pursued a very different kind of career. Would you explain what you're doing and why?
Well, Robin and I became acquainted with the desire for speakers of minority languages around the world to have the Bible translated into their mother tongues in the 1970s, and in some way or another have sort of supported this kind of work ever since. But we decided that when I retired, we'd try to find a more direct way to support this. And so I did some coursework in linguistics, and principles of translation and a little bit of biblical languages, and had a lot of on-the-job training so that I could become what's called a translation consultant. And I've worked some in Africa and some in Asia as part of that training. And what I do now is I work with mother tongue translators to check and certify their translations of the Bible. So for the last 5 years, I've been primarily working with language teams in Bangladesh for an organization, and Robin serves in that same organization, providing administrative and logistical support.
So in working with that team in Bangladesh, we know that it's filling a need for the Christian community there, and that you serving them has been a gift to them. Can you describe, though, what need it has fulfilled or filled in your life and the gifts you've received in this second career?
Well, I've not really thought about it as fulfilling a need per se. It's really been encouraging to me to see the dedication and hard work of the translators and to participate in their joy and celebration when we completed and dedicated their New Testaments this last year. It was a huge cultural celebration involved. And in thinking about it, this work probably does provide me in some ways with more satisfaction than the science that I did, because it really is a work of lasting significance, which is a need I think that most people have.
Yeah. Well, I think that's about all we can discuss unless we go into more detail, which I wouldn't understand anyway. So I would like to say thank you to Roger for making the time to be with me today and to discuss how the needs we each have can become gifts, and also meet the needs of individuals, communities, and society as a whole, which in turn brings joy and fulfillment to us. And John, thank you too.
Well, thank you for having me, Jude.
And I think you know this. There's absolutely no place in the universe I'd rather be right now than here with you.
Oh, thank you, sweetie. Well, the great music you're hearing was written and performed by Gabe Kubanda at Kubanda Music. You can find him on any streaming service. And please consider following and rating this podcast and subscribing to my free Substack newsletter. And leave a comment or review. I'd love to hear from you. Bye.